A Karen's outrageous outburst at a public pool turns into a chilling attempt to drown a young boy, leaving me no choice but to intervene. Here's what happened. So this is not something that happened to me. It is a story my professor told us happened to him. I think this is a true story, but then again, I wasn't there, so I will let Reddit be the judge of that. I thought it belongs here. I hope to do this story justice. When my teacher, we'll call him Prof, was in high school, he worked summers as a lifeguard to earn some cash. He has many interesting stories from his time as a lifeguard because many interesting people apparently attend public pools. This pool was divided in half by a lap lane. On the top half of the pool was the shallows with a set of stairs for the kiddies. On the bottom half was a small slide that emptied out in the deep end. In hindsight, this was probably a bad design because it meant that kids would constantly swim through the lap lane to get to the slide and back again. Now, there was the one lady who would frequent the pool. She would always bring a snorkel and flippers and swim the lap lane, as any sane person would do. It's the peak of summer and the pool is full of kids and their families doing as kids do, racing each other across the pool, seeing who can hold their breath the longest, flinging water at each other, etc. Along came Karen, waddling over in her flippers, snorkel piece dangling out of her mouth. She jumped into the pool and began to swim her laps with her flippers and snorkel as every normal person does. Everything is fine for half an hour until Prof spotted Karen rising menacingly from the water like a Loch Ness monster. She stood by the edge of the pool and screams, "Get these goddamn kids out of my goddamn lap lane!" Prof, being in high school, was taken aback by this. He approached her and said, "Whoa, dude, this is a family pool, you cannot say those things." Karen just glared at him. "Motherfucker, you had one fucking job. Keep these fucking kids out of my lap lane." She jumped back into the pool and swims halfway down before being intercepted by some more kids. She whirled back around and screams, "This is the one place I can go to get away from my fucking kids. I deserve this. Get these fucking kids out." Prof asked her to leave the pool due to language. She began to slowly get out of the pool, looking exasperated. Do you guys know the look people get when they are thinking real hard about something? You can see the gears in their head churning and you know that it won't be good. That was the expression Karen was making as she planned her next move. Karen turned away from the pool, shoved her snorkel back into her mouth, and fell backwards into the pool, all the while flipping Prof the double bird. Karen began to angrily swim down towards the other end of the pool. Prof could tell how pissed she was by the heavy puffing coming from the snorkel. Puff, puff, puff now. There was a group of 6th grade girls by the lap lane. They were supposed to be watching their toddler brother who was paddling around with green floaties. But these are 12-year-old girls. They are obviously not watching him. They are chatting and playing games as people should be in a public pool. Naturally, the boy scrambles over the lane divides and yeets himself into the lap lane. Puff, puff, puff. Karen came huffing down the lane, getting closer and closer to the boy. I personally like to imagine this with the Jaws music playing in the background. Prof knew instantly that this won't be good, but he was on the opposite side of the pool and watched in horror as Karen grabs the boy. The boy is so small that her hands fit around his waist, her fingertips nearly touching along his back. Karen rips the green floaties from this kid's arms and shoves him under the water, holding him there. Have you ever seen a person drowning? Their eyes snap wide, their pupils dilate as they lose control over their actions, causing them to flail wildly, even if they know how to swim. As soon as that kid began to spasm and twist, adrenaline took over. Prof had made saves before, but none like this. With all lifeguard training forgotten, he leapt into the pool, shoved Karen away. "Get off him!" Prof grabbed a hold of this kid and swam with him to the shore and hefted him onto the poolside. He called out to his friend and co-worker, "Lifeguard, get the water out," because he couldn't for the life of him remember how to administer chest compressions. The rage within Karen subsided and the heavy feeling of wrongdoing set in. She grew eerily quiet when she realized what she had done. Prof roared for her to get out of the pool. The police were called and Karen arrested. I do not know what happened after, but that boy turned out fine. Oh my gosh, OP! The audacity of this Karen, yelling like a sea beast and thinking she owns the lap lane. It's a public pool, lady. And her turning toddler dunking monster? Whoa, no way. Props to Prof though, jumping in like a hero, no hesitation. What an ending. What do you guys think about this wild situation? A Karen insisted that we put down our beloved family dog, Buddy, after accusing him of biting her daughter, despite it being just a minor scrape. Spreading rumors and trying to turn our neighbors against us, she aimed to tarnish our reputation. But here's what really went down. So when I was a baby, my parents rescued a dog from the animal shelter and named him Buddy. Buddy was half German Shepherd, half Golden Retriever. We called him our Golden Shepherd, and he was the perfect family dog. As the years passed, our family grew fairly larger. My parents' religion encouraged lots of children, and Buddy saw each of us, and our pet rabbits, like his own puppies. He would let us snuggle with him and use him as a pillow, and I think he thought he was a human since he would only walk on the sidewalk, only lay on blankets from our beds, and chasing a ball or a stick was absolutely beneath him. What a quirky boy. This story takes place when I was 12 years old, so by our best guess, Buddy was at least 13. He was old, and all the kids in our family knew to give him space and treat him nicely, just like you would an old man. We had some new neighbors who didn't like us very much. They only had one 3-year-old daughter and one indoor cat, so our lots of kids, mostly boys and indoor-outdoor dog, were a bit too loud and dirty for them. They avoided us as much as possible, but occasionally their daughter would be outside playing at the same time we were, and we would invite her to play with us. On one day like this, my sister had Buddy on a leash in the front yard, drawing with sidewalk chalk with her friend. Buddy was just laying in the sunshine next to them. The little girl came out and asked if she could draw with chalk too, and of course my sister let her and didn't think anything bad could happen. The girl, being 3, draws for a bit, then runs off, comes back to draw some more, then runs off again, and my sister doesn't worry about her because she's just being a toddler. After a bit, this little girl tried to climb on Buddy's back like a horse. My sister stopped her and explained that Buddy is an old man and that hurts his back. The little girl nods and runs off. After a little while of everything going fine, the little girl running up to Color and running away, she tries to climb on his back again. My sister again corrected her, explaining that that hurts Buddy, and we don't want to hurt him, so please don't climb on his back. The little girl says, okay, and runs off. This time, my sister moved to a different spot, a little ways away from where the girl was playing, and after a while stopped paying attention to where she was. This time the girl came back and climbed on Buddy's back a 3rd time. Just as my sister noticed her and started to say something, Buddy growled. The growl startled the little girl and she lost her balance, fell off and hit her face on the sidewalk. When my sister took her to her house to get her parents, they were convinced Buddy bit her. They wouldn't listen to my sister's story and insisted the scrape on the daughter's cheek was a dog bite, even though it was clearly a wide sidewalk scrape, not teeth marks. Buddy had no history of biting, even though he was always surrounded by kids, and my sister was there when it happened and saw the whole thing. I even rushed outside to see what all the yelling was about, saw the scrape and saw Buddy, just sitting there with his head down like he thought he was in trouble. Poor old dog wouldn't hurt a fly. In a dramatic to-do, they rushed their daughter to the hospital and got her cheek bandaged up. Remember, it was just a scrape, but okay. And sought out a military police officer with experience working with attack dogs who told them once a German Shepherd tastes blood, they will never stop trying to kill that person. They came to us that night and demanded we put our dog down, because he will try to kill their daughter. My dad was very reasonable and understood their fear, so he said he would talk to the family and get back to them. When he told us they wanted us to kill our dog, we all started crying and hugging Buddy and begging Dad not to do it. My dad was a big softy, but could be fiercely protective of his family. If anyone made us cry, it was all over. The next day he told the neighbors he believed my sister that the dog did not bite their daughter, and he was just old and trying to protect himself from being hurt by her again. They did not take this well, and from then on, they would call their daughter inside whenever they saw us, with or without the dog, and tried spreading gossip about us with the other neighbors. Everyone else liked us though, so that didn't go anywhere. Long story short, the mean neighbors moved, and Buddy lived to the ripe old age of at least 17. He died after a long battle with cancer on my 16th birthday. I went with my dad to put him down and put an end to his suffering. I didn't want him to feel abandoned on the last day of his life when he had always been such a good dog. Wow, OP, talk about a neighborly nightmare. Seriously, that Karen was something else, right guys? I mean, demanding you to put down Buddy, an old pupper who wouldn't hurt a fly, just because her toddler couldn't understand how to behave around animals? That's just off the charts. She took the word neighbor and just threw it out the window. And getting an attack dog expert to fuel the drama? That's next level Karenism. Now about the ending, it's truly heartwarming yet heartbreaking. It takes immense love and courage to accompany your beloved pet on their last journey, so hats off to you, OP. Buddy was lucky to have a family like yours, and it seems like he gave you guys just as much love and happiness in return. But what do you guys think? Was Karen being overly dramatic, or did she have a point? I mean, the answer is kinda obvious. My brother faked the severity of his mental illness to milk my parents of money for over a decade. Now their retirement is in jeopardy, and he is still convinced he did nothing wrong. Here's what happened. So I grew up in a middle-class family in a low-income area. My dad built his dream house there, and even though they could afford to move, they never wanted to. My parents had a tendency to spoil my older brother far more than me, mostly because I was the quiet one who never spoke up. This resulted in my brother getting his way more often than me. Nothing blatant, but it was enough to give him an entitlement complex a mile wide. When my brother was a teenager, he struggled with some serious mental illnesses. These were absolutely legitimate, and crippled his ability to function for several years. My parents were obviously very concerned for him, and so they willingly paid top dollar for the best psychiatrist and psychologist that they could find to help him. By the time I was ready to go to a different city to start university, my brother was at a stage where he was ready to go as well. It was decided that he would go to a university as the same city as me, and we would live together. My parents offered to pay for our rent all the way through university, so us flatting together obviously made a lot of financial sense for them. We would have to pay for everything else out of our student loans. Everything was set. We had found a good student flat, settled in, etc. He had a new care team in this new city. Awesome. Unfortunately, my brother had an episode on his first day that resulted in him not going to class. This meant he was removed from his program, compulsory first day, with the option of starting again in the second semester. Now, the obvious, logical, and sensible thing to do in that situation is for my brother to go home while I found a roommate to take the spare bedroom, and he could move back up and try again next semester. My brother didn't like that idea. You see, he always hated living at home. He would always whine about how old our house was or how poor our neighborhood looked. Our neighborhood was lovely, great sense of community, and I always loved it there. But he felt that he deserved better. Next thing we know, his new psychologist has written a letter to my parents stating that it would be a good idea to allow him to stay living in the new city, to allow him to acclimate to his surroundings. My parents followed this advice and allowed him to stay. They replaced his weekly loan amount with an allowance of the same value and thought everything would move forward from there. This worked for a few weeks, but my brother started to hound my parents for more money. You see, he wasn't a student, so in his mind, why should he have to live like a student? No instant noodles and TV dinners for him. He wanted steak and lamb for dinner. He wanted to go to nice restaurants with his friends and go shopping whenever he felt like it. He wanted a new iPhone and a new MacBook because his was slow, etc. My parents eventually gave in and doubled his allowance. Second semester rolls around and my brother hasn't even bothered enrolling. My parents weren't happy, but his psychologist writes him another letter, and so it continues. Fast forward 3 years, and I am graduating with a job offer from my university in my field. The apartment is nice and convenient to my new job, so I continue to live there, only now I pay for my half of the rent and utilities. My brother is still not working or studying, and his allowance is now almost equal to my salary. Every time my parents try to force him home, his psychologist writes another letter, and my parents' trust in my brother's care team was high. They did save his life after all. By this point, my parents are just paying for his half of the utilities directly on top of his allowance. I suggested to my parents to get a second medical opinion, as he had been seeing this psychologist almost weekly for 3 years with no improvement, but my brother flat out refuses. He likes her. She speaks to his soul, whatever that means. About a year and a half after I graduate, our landlord decides to sell the apartment, and the new owners want to live there. Normal thing that happens, and I'm not too bothered by this. I wanted to take the opportunity to get my own place. I have a serious girlfriend whom I want to eventually marry, so would like my own space that she could one day move into, and just generally move on with my adult life. But my parents don't want my brother living on his own just yet, and again, he is refusing to come home. They beg me to stay for just 1 more year while they figure out an arrangement for him. We got rather short notice to move, so I can understand this, and 1 more year won't matter too much to me. So apartment hunting we go. My brother goes fully off the entitlement deep end. He will only view apartments well outside of our price range. Anything within budget is either too old, or too small, or too dark, or too ugly. He wants a new modern apartment in an expensive suburb in the heart of the city. His psychologist writes another letter outlining the importance of a comfortable environment for him. My parents cave once again and agree to get his dream apartment for us, but I can't afford half of the new rent. They compromise with me, and I only have to pay the same rent as I was before, which is barely 1/3 of the rent at the new place, mind you. It's a beautiful apartment, so I was okay with the deal even though I wasn't happy. Unfortunately, my brother is now used to getting everything he wants or needs. He starts asking me to pay for more and more of the groceries. Idiot me, thinking that mom and dad had cut down on his allowance now that the rent is so expensive. Agree to take up some of the slack. Big mistake. They were still giving him the same amount. He just wanted more. He starts asking me for more and more things, and then whines to mom when I don't give it him. My parents cave over and over again and get him whatever he wants. New computer, new MacBook, new iPhone, heck even a car. Up until this point, my parents could afford all of this, and, somehow, still save well for their retirement. My mom was completely honest with me about their finances, as when the time came the power of attorney would transfer to me, so she wanted me to know where they stood. They were on track for a long, comfortable retirement. But then my dad unfortunately lost his job through very unusual circumstances. His company just disappeared, and his boss left the country. This messed my dad up for quite a while, and he decided it was time to kick back and enjoy an early retirement. He was only 2 years short of retirement age anyway. My brother was furious. He would rage about how dad had betrayed him for no continuing to work to fund his lifestyle. He would regularly yell at my mom over the phone saying that he expects them to continue to support him because he deserves the security of the lifestyle he has earned. I laughed my ass off at that line, which turned into another long fight, but was totally worth it. I knew that without Dad's income my parents couldn't afford the rent where we lived, so I decided to force the issue and moved into my own place. I had hoped that this would result in my brother moving as well, but alas, his psychologist wrote him another letter, and he continued to live there. I moved on with my life, got married, went back to university, bought a house, grown-up stuff. 5 years go by and I have virtually no contact with my brother. I'm visiting my parents one day, and when I take them out for lunch my mom breaks down crying because she can't pay. It turns out that my brother had been blackmailing my parents to continue to support him, saying that if they didn't he'd end up homeless and it would be their fault, etc. He still had the full support of his medical team, and my parents didn't know what to do. He had burned through nearly 20 years worth of retirement savings since I moved out. My parents were both forced to go back to work to try and stretch out their retirement savings. I decide to visit this psychologist myself, only to find out she is one of those tell people what they want to hear so they keep giving me money, predatory type psychologists who was enabling my brother because he was a cash cow for her. Our entire family was furious. Turns out my brother had been recovered since his first year living away from home. He was perfectly able to work or study, he just didn't want to, and so she wrote him those bogus letters to let him get away with it. He decided to milk my parents of their savings to fund his lifestyle, because he had earned it, and they owed him for not giving him what he wanted when he was younger. When confronted about it, he was entirely unapologetic. As far as he is concerned, he was entitled to everything he got and then some. It's been a few years since then, and my parents have completely cut him off. They are surviving, but within a few years I will probably end up having to support them. I have no issue with this. I'm their son, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to do so, but it breaks my dad's heart knowing this. He grew up dirt poor and worked his ass off to provide for us, only to see it all disappear because of my selfish brother. The psychologist had her license suspended after my parents laid a complaint. I don't know if it was temporary or not, but I hope it was permanent. As for my brother, he works a dead-end retail job with a live-in boyfriend who pays for almost everything. He's still an entitled ass, and I only see him during Christmas. I just want to emphasize my brother had legitimate mental health issues. I do not want to take away from that at all. He just chose to willfully deceive everyone about the severity in order to demand that everyone else give him the life he feels he deserves. And before you ask, no, his mental illness did not contribute towards this attitude. It's not that sort of illness. He's just an entitled dickwad. I am so sorry that you and your parents had to suffer through that. It is real easy to be judging from the outside, but most don't realize how hard it is to stand up to a narcissist. Your parents did everything right raising you because despite living with and enduring a manipulative sibling, you have turned out great, compassionate, caring, and responsible. Hopefully you and your parents can recover from that as a family and enjoy being together for a long time to come. As for your brother, he can go kick rocks. May his fried chicken always be soggy and his remote control only work after pressing 3 times.